July 2, 1943, Castelvetrano Airfield, Sicily. The Focke-Wulf 190 pilot never saw it coming. One moment, he was climbing above the Sicilian skies, scanning for American bombers, and the next, a P-40 Warhawk dove from the sunlit clouds above. Machine gun fire tore through his fuselage, sending his fighter into a chaotic spiral toward the rolling countryside below. The pilot behind the trigger? First Lieutenant Charles B. Hall, a 22-year-old from Brazil, Indiana. That single moment would forever etch Hall's name into history. For the German Luftwaffe commanders watching the skies, it was impossible. A black pilot had just shot down one of their elite fighters. The swastika painted on Hall's P-40 that afternoon became a symbol of defiance and excellence. It marked the first of 112 enemy aircraft destroyed by the men who the Germans would later call Schwarze Vogelmenschen, the Blackbirdmen. In Nazi Germany, the ideology was cruelly clear. Black people were classified as Untermensch, subhuman, incapable of mastering complex machines or demonstrating bravery in combat. The Nuremberg laws forbade marriage between Germans and people of African descent. And yet, high above the Mediterranean, reality would collide catastrophically with these racist beliefs. From Tuskegee, Alabama, 992 highly trained pilots would systematically dismantle German aircraft and demolish the notion of racial superiority, rewriting the calculus of aerial warfare over Europe. The Luftwaffe pilots, climbing to intercept American bombers in 1943, had no idea what they were about to face. Some of the most rigorously trained, fearless, and determined fighter pilots the United States Army Air Forces had ever produced. These men had overcome barriers their white counterparts never encountered. They trained harder, endured longer, and carried into combat not just the weight of duty, but the responsibility of proving the capability of an entire race. Every flight, every engagement was more than a mission. It was a statement. The numbers would soon tell the story. 15,000 combat sorties, 1,578 missions, 112 confirmed aerial victories, and bomber escort loss rates far lower than those of white fighter groups. These statistics would force even the most hardened Nazi ideologues to confront the bankruptcy of their racial theories. But the path to that first victory didn't begin in the skies above Sicily. It began in a nation still grappling with its own prejudices. In 1925, the U.S. Army War College published a report entitled Employment of Negro Manpower in War. Its conclusion was stark. Compared to the white man, he is admittedly of inferior mentality. He is inherently weak in character. This official assessment claimed that black soldiers lacked the intelligence for technical roles and the courage for leadership in combat. Yet, even as military authorities clung to these false notions, a small group of black Americans was already proving them wrong. Eugene Bullard had flown for France during World War I because America would not allow him to serve. Bessie Coleman, denied acceptance by any American flight school, earned her pilot's license in France in 1921. By the 1930s, the Coffey School of Aeronautics in Chicago had trained dozens of black civilian pilots. Proving skill knew no racial boundaries. As storm clouds of war gathered over Europe, pressure for change intensified. Civil rights leaders like Walter White of the NAACP, labor activist A. Philip Randolph, and Judge William H. Hastie lobbied relentlessly for black inclusion in military aviation. Black newspapers, the Chicago Defender, the Pittsburgh Courier, and the Baltimore Afro-American, pressed the Roosevelt administration with a powerful question. How could America claim to fight for democracy abroad while denying it at home? On April 3, 1939, Public Law 18 cracked the door open. Senator Harry H. Schwartz inserted an amendment requiring the civilian pilot training program to include schools designated for training black air pilots. It was a grudging concession, still steeped in segregation, but it was a beginning. When Franklin Roosevelt ran for an unprecedented third term in 1940, black votes in northern cities were critical. On January 16, 1941, Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson announced the formation of the 99th Pursuit Squadron, an all-black flying unit. The announcement came with a caveat. This would be an experiment, a test to see if black men could be trained to fly and fight in combat. Captain Benjamin O. Davis Jr. understood the weight of command, leading 26 pilots of the 99th Fighter Squadron to North Africa in April 1943. He carried not only his own responsibilities, but the aspirations of 13 million black Americans. Davis, the son of the nation's first black general, had endured 4 years of silent treatment at West Point, where no white cadet would speak to him outside of formal duties. Now he commanded men who had trained under extraordinary pressure, who faced prejudice at every step, and who were ready to prove themselves not just as pilots, but as Americans. The 99th arrived at Farquhar, Tunisia, attached to the 33rd Fighter Group under Colonel William W. Momyer, a commander openly skeptical of black pilots. Every flight would be a test, not just of skill, but of courage, perseverance, and the ability to defy expectations. Above the skies of Europe, the Tuskegee Airmen were about to rewrite history. With every takeoff, dogfight, and bomber escort, they weren't just flying, they were challenging an entire ideology. The mathematics of aerial combat, the very rules of the sky, would soon bear witness to their extraordinary skill. The men of the 99th Fighter Squadron were sent on patrol missions over the Mediterranean, but not by choice. Colonel Meyer assigned them to these flights not to challenge them, but to keep them away from the real action. He wanted them to fail, to prove his own prejudice correct. Yet, the Tuskegee pilots refused to be pawns in a game of racism. When they didn't immediately excel, Meyer found excuses, but their skill and determination were already quietly shaping history. The morning of June 2, 1943 marked their first real combat mission, an attack on the Italian-held island of Pantelleria. As the P-40 Warhawks climbed toward their target, German fighters suddenly appeared, their sleek, deadly Focke-Wulfs cutting through the sky like knives. The Tuskegee pilots held formation, tight and disciplined, shielding the bombers as bullets rained down. No aircraft were lost, and though there were no dramatic kills that day, the Germans had already learned their first lesson. These pilots would not break under pressure. But it was July 2, 1943, that would change everything. Charles Hall, flying his 8th combat mission, was escorting B-25 Mitchell bombers attacking Castelvetrano airfield in Sicily. 2 Focke-Wulf 190s dove aggressively toward the bombers, eager for easy kills. Hall later testified, "I saw 2 Focke-Wulfs following the bombers just after the bombs were dropped. I headed for the space between the fighters and bombers and managed to turn inside the Diaries. I fired a long burst and saw my traces penetrate the second aircraft. He was turning to the left but suddenly fell off and headed straight into the ground. When Hall's Warhawk landed, the airfield erupted in celebration. Black ground crews, who had endured months of insults, doubt and condescension from their white counterparts, finally had their answer. The victory was more than personal. It was historic. This was the first aerial kill by a black American pilot in US military history. By January 1944, the 99th Fighter Squadron had been in combat for 7 months. Yet a report from Colonel Meyer still claimed they lacked aggressiveness and recommended their removal from combat. The document made its way to General Henry Hap Arnold, the Army Air Force's chief, who was ready to shut down the experiment altogether. Then came Anzio. On January 27, 1944, the Luftwaffe launched massive raids on Allied forces at the Anzio beachhead. 15 pilots of the 99th, flying outdated P-40s, faced superior Focke-Wulf 190s over the battlefield. What happened next would silence even the harshest critics. Over 2 days, the 99th shot down multiple enemy aircraft. Sources vary between 8 and 13 kills, but one thing was clear: Captain Charles Hall personally scored 2 more victories, bringing his total to 3. In just 48 hours, flying inferior aircraft, the squadron had destroyed more planes than they had in the previous 7 months of combat. The War Department could no longer ignore the truth. A comparative study showed the 99th's performance was equal to that of white squadrons flying the same P-40s. The Tuskegee pilots had proved, once and for all, that skill and courage were not determined by skin color. Their next challenge would come in May 1944, when the 332nd Fighter Group was formed, combining the 99th, 100th, 301st, and 302nd Fighter Squadrons. These men were no longer just proving a point, they were about to cement their legend. The 332nd joined the 15th Air Force, tasked with long-range bomber escort missions deep into the heart of Nazi Germany. Colonel Benjamin O. Davis Jr. gathered his pilots at Ramitelli Airfield on Italy's Adriatic coast. He reminded them, "We cannot afford to lose bombers. Our job is not to be aces. Our job is to bring those bombers home." This became the defining philosophy of the Tuskegee Airmen. Protect the bombers at all costs, above personal glory. In June 1944, General Nathan Twining implemented a systematic marking system for all fighter groups. Each squadron received distinctive colors for instant identification. The 332nd was assigned red, but this wasn't just a small stripe or a tail band. It was entire tail sections, red propeller spinners, and red nosebands, turning their P-51 Mustangs into instantly recognizable flying guardians. The first bomber crews to be escorted by the red tails didn't know their protectors were black. They only knew one thing: these fighters never left their side, never abandoned the bombers for easy kills. Word spread quickly among Allied bomber crews. Request the red tails if you can get them. The true test came on July 18, 1944. Colonel Davis led 66 P-51 Mustangs to rendezvous with bombers targeting a Luftwaffe base at Memmingen, Germany. The bombers were delayed. Davis made a bold, dangerous choice: orbit in enemy territory rather than return to base. When the bombers finally arrived, so did the Luftwaffe, about 100 German fighters attacking from all directions. The sky erupted in chaotic, furious combat. Despite overwhelming odds, the 332nd stood their ground. They claimed 11 to 12 victories in the engagement, but the cost was high. 15 B-17 bombers were lost in just 20 minutes, along with 3 Tuskegee pilots, Lieutenants Robert Hutton, Wellington Irving, and Alfred Brown. Critics tried to frame the losses as proof that black pilots couldn't handle major battles. Yet operational analysis told the real story. The 332nd had arrived in the middle of a nightmare, with massive German forces already engaging the bombers. Their skill and discipline prevented total disaster. By March 1945, the Luftwaffe's conventional fighters could barely challenge Allied air supremacy. The Red Tails had proven themselves time and again, transforming skepticism into awe, prejudice into respect. The Tuskegee Airmen had done more than fly planes. They had shattered barriers, redefined courage, and demonstrated that valor and skill were not bound by race, but by training, discipline, and determination. The Red Tails were no longer just pilots. They were symbols of hope, proof of equality, and legends of the sky. By 1945, Germany had one last card to play: the Messerschmitt Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter. With a top speed of 540 mph, it could outrun any propeller-driven aircraft, and pilots believed it would finally turn the tide in the Luftwaffe's favor. But the Tuskegee Airmen were about to prove, once again, that courage, skill, and strategy could overcome technological superiority. On March 24, 1945, the 332nd Fighter Group received its most challenging mission yet: escort a formation of bombers on a 1,600-mile round trip to Berlin. Their target was the Daimler-Benz tank factory, a critical part of Germany's war machine. Intelligence warned that Me-262s from Jagdgeschwader 7 would be defending the target, the largest jet fighter force ever assembled for a single interception. Colonel Benjamin O. Davis Jr. led 43 P-51 Mustangs deep into the heart of the Reich. As they neared Berlin, the sky erupted in motion. The sleek, terrifying jets appeared on the horizon. The German pilots expected to dominate, but the Tuskegee Airmen had a plan. Lieutenant Roscoe Brown, who had studied the jets' capabilities, explained their tactic. We knew the German jets were faster than we were. Instead of going straight after them, we maneuvered away and then turned into their blind spots. It was audacious, daring, and risky, but it worked. Brown shot down one Me-262, later recounting, "I pulled up at him in a 15-degree climb and fired 3 long bursts from 2,000 feet at 8 o'clock. Almost immediately, the pilot bailed out from about 2,500 feet. Lieutenant Earl Lane performed what many considered impossible: a 2,000-yard deflection shot using the new K-14 computing gun sight, taking down another Me-262 with precision that amazed even seasoned pilots." Lieutenant Charles Brantley claimed the third jet that day. In one single engagement, the Red Tails had destroyed more Me-262s than most American fighter groups would in the entire war. Their feat earned the 332nd Fighter Group a Distinguished Unit citation, cementing their reputation as elite pilots who could overcome any odds. Not every encounter ended in victory. 32. Tuskegee Airmen became prisoners of war. revealing the complicated realities of Nazi ideology versus battlefield experience. Lieutenant Alexander Jefferson was shot down on August 12, 1944, during his 19th mission. Strafing radar installations over southern France, his P-51 took heavy flak. Captured, he was interrogated by a German officer who had astonishingly detailed intelligence. He knew about Ramitelli Airfield, our squadron commanders, even my parents' home in Detroit. Their intelligence was frighteningly thorough. Yet inside Stalag Luft III, Jefferson experienced something he could never have imagined in segregated America. White POWs from bomber crews treated him with gratitude and respect, acknowledging the Red Tail's protection. Jefferson later reflected, "Here I was in a Nazi prison camp, being treated more equally than I would back home." The irony was sharp. German racial ideology collapsed in the face of Tuskegee skill, and American bomber crews became the pilots' most vocal champions. These men had no concern for race in the sky, only survival and mission success. Bomber crews developed their own mythology for these fearless pilots, the Red Tail Angels. They became legendary not just for their flying skill, but for their discipline, courage, and loyalty. They would waggle their wings in greeting, fly tight formations, and never abandon damaged bombers. Their reputation was backed by cold, hard numbers. Research by Air Force historian Dr. Daniel Holman revealed that bombers under 332nd Fighter Group escort lost only 27 aircraft to enemy fighters, compared to an average of 46 for other P-51 groups. And the Red Tails flew some of the longest and most dangerous missions of the war. By the war's end, the Tuskegee Airmen had compiled a combat record that shattered every pre-war assumption about black military capability. Funza 78 combat missions flown, with over 15,000 individual sorties completed. Bomber escort missions, including 301 missions specifically for the 15th Air Force. Enemy aircraft destroyed in aerial combat, plus 150 destroyed on the ground. The 3 Me-262 jets taken down on March 24, 1945, became legendary. Ground targets destroyed: 950 railcars, trucks, and motor vehicles, 254 locomotive engines, and the Italian destroyer Giuseppe Missori damaged beyond repair on June 25, 1944. Protection record: 27 bombers lost under Tuskegee escort versus 46 average for other groups. Individual achievements included pilots like Lee Archer, with 4 confirmed aerial victories. Their record was more than impressive. It was transformative. The Red Tails didn't just fight for victory, they redefined what was possible for an entire nation, proving that skill, discipline, and courage were not limited by skin color. By March 1945, the Red Tails were no longer just a squadron. They were living symbols of equality and excellence. Heroes who had protected thousands of bombers, destroyed hundreds of enemy aircraft, and inspired generations of Americans to believe in the power of talent, determination, and opportunity. The legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen wasn't just in the skies over Europe, it was in the hearts of those who would follow, breaking barriers, challenging prejudice, and rewriting history with courage and skill as their weapons. The names of the Tuskegee Airmen read like a roster of legends. Joseph Ellsbury with 4 victories, including 3 FW-190s on July 12, 1944. Edward Toppins, 4 victories. Clarence Lester, 3 kills in a single mission on July 18, 1944. These were not just numbers, they were proof against a lifetime of prejudice. The decorations earned by these pilots are staggering. 96. Distinguished Flying Crosses awarded to members of the 332nd Fighter Group, 704 Air Medals, 14 Bronze Stars, 8 Purple Hearts, and 3 Distinguished Unit Citations for the 99th Fighter Squadron, along with 1 for the 332nd Fighter Group itself. Yet the human cost was severe. 66 pilots were killed in action, 32 captured as prisoners of war, and 84 perished in training and non-combat missions. Every victory, every medal came with sacrifice, a stark reminder that courage in the air demanded payment in blood and steel. The transformation from mockery to respect wasn't just about bravery. It was about skill, preparation, and superior American training. At Tuskegee, pilots logged more flying hours than their white counterparts, 300 hours versus 200. They practiced formation, flying obsessively, knowing that discipline in combat would save lives. The washout rate was 60% compared to 40% for white cadets, meaning only the best of the best earned their wings. Colonel Noel Parrish, Tuskegee commander, called them a super-selected group, elite from the start, forged in fire and scrutiny. Their equipment evolved as well. The 99th Squadron started with hand-me-down P-40 Warhawks, already considered obsolete upon arrival in North Africa. These liquid-cooled Allison engine fighters were inferior to German Bf-109s and FW-190s in almost every performance metric. But the Tuskegee pilots turned disadvantages into strength, using the P-40's rugged construction and superior turning ability to hold their own against elite Luftwaffe units. By July 1944, the arrival of P-51 Mustangs changed everything. The North American P-51D Mustang represented American industrial perfection. Its Packard-built Merlin engine could push the aircraft to 437 mph, while 6 50-caliber machine guns could destroy virtually any opponent in a dogfight. Most importantly, the Mustang had a range of over 1,600 miles with drop tanks, allowing the Red Tails to escort bombers anywhere in the Reich, a strategic game-changer. Behind every pilot stood dozens of support personnel, mechanics, armorers, crew chiefs, whose work kept the Red Tails flying. Of the 16,000 Tuskegee Airmen who served, fewer than 1,000 were pilots. The rest were the unsung heroes, working tirelessly in primitive airfields like Ramatelli, Italy, often without spare parts, often last in line for supplies. Despite these hardships, aircraft availability equaled or exceeded that of white units. These ground crews faced danger as well. On March 24, 1944, a German bombing raid struck Ramatelli. Several support personnel were killed, but the survivors kept working, pulling aircraft from burning fuel dumps to save their comrades and maintain the mission schedule. Strategic bomber protection was the ultimate test. Each B-17 Flying Fortress cost $238,000 and carried 10 highly trained crew members. A single bomber lost was a strategic setback, potentially shifting the balance of the air war. That is why Colonel Davis insisted, stay with the bombers no matter what. Anyone can shoot down a fighter if they abandon their post, he said. It takes discipline to stay with the bombers when the enemy is running. The Red Tails perfected escort tactics through experience, developing a 3-layer defense system, close escort weaving directly above the bombers, medium escort positioned to intercept approaching fighters, and high escort scanning for diving attacks. Every mission required coordination, precision, and absolute discipline. In doing so, the Tuskegee Airmen were fighting 2 wars at once, against fascism overseas and racism at home. Their record challenged Nazi racial ideology, proving that skill, courage, and excellence knew no color. Yet, the battle against prejudice continued in America. Their victories made headlines in black newspapers, but mainstream press often ignored or minimized their achievements. The Pittsburgh Courier's Double V campaign, Victory Abroad Against Fascism and Victory at Home Against Racism, used the Tuskegee Airmen as a rallying symbol. Meanwhile, the Luftwaffe knew exactly who flew the red-tailed Mustangs, calling them Schwarze Vogelmenschen. Many white Americans, however, remained ignorant of these heroes' existence, deliberately kept in the shadows by the War Department. Victory in Europe brought not parades, but uncertainty. While white units celebrated, the 332nd faced questions about its future. Segregation would continue, despite evidence of its absurdity. Decades would pass before mainstream America fully acknowledged their extraordinary contribution. For the surviving pilots, recognition came slowly. Lee Archer, with 4 confirmed aerial victories, rarely spoke of his wartime accomplishments. "Nobody believed me anyway," he said. "A black fighter pilot must be lying." In 1948, President Harry Truman signed Executive Order 9981, integrating the U.S. military, a decision influenced heavily by the Tuskegee Airmen's combat record. Benjamin Davis, who had led the Red Tails over Berlin, became the Air Force's first black general in 1954. In 2007, President George W. Bush awarded the Congressional Gold Medal to the Tuskegee Airmen. Only 300 of the original pilots survived to attend, many waiting over 60 years for national recognition. The numbers speak for themselves. Aerial victories against the Luftwaffe 3, Me-262, jet fighters destroyed in one mission 150 enemy aircraft, destroyed on the ground 27 bombers lost versus 46 average for other P-51 Group 6, distinguished flying crosses awarded. The nickname Schwarzer Vogel Mention proved that prejudice crumbles under undeniable capability. Every aircraft destroyed, every bomber protected, every mission completed demonstrated that the color of a pilot's skin had nothing to do with his ability to fight and win. Lieutenant Roscoe Brown, who shot down a German jet over Berlin, summed it up perfectly. We didn't just fight the Germans. We fought ignorance, prejudice, and hatred. And we won all three battles. The Tuskegee Airmen didn't just win battles in the sky, they changed history. They fought 3 wars simultaneously, defeating the Luftwaffe, dismantling Nazi racial ideology through their performance, and helping pave the way to desegregate the US military. When given the opportunity, the Tuskegee Airmen soared, transforming mockery into respect, prejudice into acceptance, and leaving a legacy that continues to inspire generations of Americans to believe that skill, courage, and determination transcend race.